Good morning to you. How you doing? We've had snow in South Manchester this morning. We've actually had snow. Yes, on March 10th. It's been a chilly one. It's been a bit dull, a bit grim. Bit of snow this morning. Seems to be brightening up now. Hope you're well this Sunday. Hope you've had a nice weekend. My name is Richie Allen. You know that. This is Sunday View. I'm going to look through the front pages of the UK's Sunday newspapers, as well as looking at some of the stories inside as well. And we will hear from some of the main players whom appeared on this morning's television chat shows as well. We'll hear some of that, the political shows as well. It is Sunday View. You can participate as usual by tweeting at Richie Allen Show. That's the Twitter handle. Sunday View it is.
Asking the questions mainstream journalists will never ask. This is your Richie Allen Show on richieallen.co.uk, Fab Radio 2 in Manchester, and triggerwarning.tv.
And I want to say a big shout out, or give a big shout out and say a big hello to Himanshi, who's listening to this program just outside New Delhi in the amazing country of India. It's been a while, Himanshi. Lovely to hear from you. Good morning. Good morning, I said.
It's the Richie Allen Show, broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
Yes, and her brother Dipanshu as well, who got her into this type of program. All right, Sunday View. I have so much to do. Let's just get rid of the theme tune, because there's a lot of stuff to talk about this morning, even though the Sunday newspapers are dominated, of course, by Brexit. I hear the groans. I know I say this every week, but I actually can hear the groans. I will talk about some of the press coverage of Brexit this morning. Of course I will. But there's plenty of other things to talk about as well. There's been a lot of coverage of the death of the baby of Shamima Begum, this woman who left. Well, she wasn't a woman. She was 15 when she left the UK to go to Syria and join ISIS. Well, her child has died in a refugee camp. There's been a lot of coverage of that. We'll talk about that, you and I. Venezuela as well. And one or two other things besides Brexit. It won't just be Brexit-centric, the Sunday View show today. All right. Loads of tweets coming in already. Good morning. Very good morning to you all. Thanks for tweeting me and participating, because it's all the more fun when you join in with your tuppence worth as well. At least that's how I feel about it. I do genuinely enjoy that. Right, the Sunday Express will kick off with front page. Rotten deal means we'll never leave the EU. That's the headline. And it's about Jacob Rees-Mogg. I can't resist terminological inexactitude, darling. He's in the paper today. He's writing in the paper today, talking about May's deal, which, if May's deal is agreed as it is, this will be voted, by the way, on Tuesday. So there will be a vote on Tuesday, okay, on May's deal. As it is, it isn't any different than the deal that was hammered by record numbers when she last brought it before Parliament last month. Mogg is basically saying, if we take this deal, we're never leaving the European Union, right? That's the Sunday Express. Rotten deal means we'll never leave the European Union. You might know this, you might not, but Jacob Rees-Mogg is one of several politicians with their own radio shows these days. I've had quite a bit to say about that. You wouldn't expect any otherwise. You wouldn't expect anything else, would you? I've had a bit to say about the spectre of politicians being given their own radio shows and the multitude of things that are very wrong about that. I'll not get into it here. Look up previous programmes. Oh, free speech. No, it's got nothing to do with free speech. Politicians getting radio shows on national radio stations is not a good thing. If you want, during the week we'll get into this again. I'll explain why in more detail. Anyway, Mogg has his own programme. Here he discusses with a member of the public who phoned in. In theory, you see, they take calls from the public, but believe me, dear listener, the calls are heavily screened. So Mogg discusses with a member of the public this notion, the notion that Theresa May has deliberately negotiated a wretched deal so that Theresa May can then say, well, look, it's either my lousy deal or we stay in or we don't leave. The caller raises this as a possibility. Mogg seems to think that the caller is onto something. Have a listen. Here's the caller, then you'll hear the presenter, Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Yeah, no, I believe the ERD and the DUP should reject this blackmailing attempt by the Prime Minister. I think this has been a game right from the off, just to get us into the middle of March, to the 11th hour, and basically hold a gun to our heads and say, my way or the highway.
Do you think this has been the strategy all the way along, basically to come up with a pretty rotten deal and then at the last minute say, well, if you don't back it, then we might not leave?
Absolutely. I believe Theresa May is a Remainer at heart. She's always wanted to keep us as close to the EU and the ECJ as close as possible. And I believe the ERG is the only people in the House of Parliament who are representing the people. And I think that the ERG, DUP, should hold firm and reject this deal.
Yeah, the DUP is the Democratic Unionist Party in Northern Ireland. The ERG is the European Research Group, which is a group of conservatives in Westminster whom are very much in favour of leaving the European Union at the speed of light, and preferably with no deal, just leave, right? Okay. What's happening this week then? Because it can be confusing, even to somebody like me who reads these articles day in, day out. It can be confusing. So what's happening this week? Well, on Tuesday, Theresa May's agreement with the European Union, the deal, will be put back to Parliament. Apparently, she'll be flying into Brussels again tomorrow to beg the EU's negotiators to give her some concessions on this Northern Ireland backstop nonsense, which is a load of old balls. This idea that, we can't have a hard border in Ireland, between Northern Ireland and Ireland, so we've got to put this backstop in, which would temporarily keep the UK in a customs union to avoid that hard border. See, the problem is it isn't temporary. The way it's been written into the agreement that May has made with the European Union is that it isn't temporary. It's basically fairly permanent. And they're not budging on this. Right? Okay, this is the big thing. She's not going to get any new concessions. So on Tuesday, they will vote on May's deal. Presuming that Parliament rejects Theresa May's deal again, which it will probably, on Wednesday, they will go and they will vote on no deal. In other words, on Wednesday, there will then be a vote on whether to take no deal off the table, which is lunacy. Of course, everybody understands that, regardless of where they fit on the spectrum, whether they want to stay, whether they want to leave. Taking no deal out of the equation is madness. So presumably then, they do take no deal off the table. Imagine that. You could have this on Wednesday, where Parliament votes and says there can be no deal. There must be some sort of a deal. On Thursday, they will vote again. It's going to be an interesting week. On Thursday, they will then vote on whether to extend Article 50. You with me? I think I've explained that in as basic language as I possibly can. That's the way it's going. The Sunday Telegraph headline on the front page is "Public Swinging Behind No Deal." The Telegraph reports on a Comres poll that finds that 44% of the public now believe that the UK should walk away without a deal if Brussels doesn't make any more concessions. So that's interesting. 44% of the public, according to Comres, says, yeah, okay, if Brussels doesn't offer any concessions on the backstop, we should just get out, wash our hands of it and leave. That's a 6-point increase from a similar poll that was carried out in January. Less than a third of people polled disagreed. So that's interesting, I suppose. This came as 74 senior Tory activists, including more than 50 association chairmen, told May that Conservative voters do not fear a no-deal Brexit and they just want a Brexit, full stop. Steve Baker, who's a senior Brexiteer today, and Nigel Dodds, the DUP's Westminster leader, said today wrote in the Times newspaper, that it is now inevitable that the unchanged deal will be voted down on Tuesday, predicting a 3-figure defeat there. So it's all going to collapse this week, really. Former Brexit Secretary Dominic Raab told Sophie Ridge on Sky this morning that while leaving with no deal is not his preference, It is better than May's deal, and it's better than delaying Brexit. Dominic Grab in conversation briefly with Sophie Ridge.
So you'd prefer it to an extension, would you?
Oh, I think an extension, put it this way, none of the challenges or the problems that we've got now get any better if we extend. And what it will do is embolden those who frankly want to derail and frustrate Brexit. So I think we should keep our promises, frankly, on this. We've legislated, so the default position is that we leave on the 29th of March, preferably with a deal, if not on WTO terms. But if that doesn't happen, I think we should keep the promise that every Conservative made in the manifesto, that no deal was better than a bad deal.
Yeah, pretty much. No deal better than a bad deal. The deal as it stands basically keeps the UK in the European Union. It's what they call Brexit in name only. It's a joke. Andy tweets, Richie, BBC News website asks what we need to know about the upcoming Brexit vote. All Brexiteers need to know is they are being shafted by the establishment, and that includes the BBC. The BBC being part of the establishment, says Andy. Thanks so much, Andy. I appreciate that. David tweets, media, radio, should be hosted by an impartial perspective, not to promote a tainted ideology. Politicians sit down for this one, says David. This is the reality that we've entered in the last couple of years, where national radio stations are giving politicians their own radio programmes and then hiding behind we've balanced it. We've got Labour Party people with their own radio show, and we've got Conservative Party people with their own radio show. So what are you complaining about, Richie? Like I said, I've gotten into this before in great detail about how very wrong and very sinister it is to be doing that. Hi to Gail. Good morning, Gail, who's retweeting David Vance, who's been on this programme before. David is a unionist from Northern Ireland. He's an interesting guy. I've had him on before. Like to have him on. The UK voted to leave back in 2016. A deal was not on the ballot paper, tweets David Vance. Theresa May inserted this along with the transition period, along with the £39 billion payment promise, in what can be seen as an attempt to derail leave. I would echo what David Vance says there, even though David and I come from different places when it comes to our politics. No harm in that either. Good morning to Celia Moore. Good morning, Celia. Thanks for tweeting me this morning, folks. I really appreciate it. Ricky as well, to Patrick Vidine. Patrick, on the baby passing away, the child of Shamima Begum, which is a terrible thing, regardless of what you think about her ideology. Patrick tweets, Sajid Javid has no right to revoke British citizenship, and the government has abrogated its responsibilities, and the death of a third child could have been avoided, apparently 2 children that she had previously. You see, this girl has been raped. There's no doubt about this, right? Leave aside for a minute what the UK intelligence, French intelligence and Israeli intelligence have done, because they've created Islamic State, and the Saudis, they've created this head-chopping death cult. It is the creation of Western intelligence, and it has been funded and it has been given oxygen by Western intelligence. This girl was 15 when she made the lunatic decision to go off to Syria and do and live that life. But from the moment she got out there, she was abused by men and possibly women of this head-chopping death cult. She is a British citizen. Look, we'll talk about it in a minute. I'll give you my opinion, but I'm happy to be shot down by you. So give me the contrary opinion. I'll be happy to hear. Good morning to Martin, who's listening in Spain. Good morning, mate. Nice to hear from you today as well. Right, we better move on. It's 14 minutes. It is now past 11. It is Sunday morning, the 10th of March, 2019. You're with Sunday View with Richie Allen. What about the shadow Brexit Secretary Keir Starmer? He was also on with Sophie Ridge too, who asked him, do you want to leave, or is your position now, and the Labour Party position now, that you want to remain? Interesting stuff. Sophie Ridge, Keir Starmer, the shadow Brexit Secretary. For our overseas listeners, for every government minister and government secretary of state, there is a shadow counterpart in the main opposition party. Okay. Keir Starmer and Sophie Ridge.
In the spirit of trying to provide clarity, we're talking there about Norway, some of the different deals that could happen if the UK stays in. We're also talking about the idea of a second public vote where presumably Remain will be on the ballot paper. So just to be really, really clear about Labour's position, do you want to leave or not?
Well, we campaign to Remain.
Got to think about this really carefully, Keir, don't you? They've done so many flip-flops on this Labour as a party. He doesn't know what to say.
But when the result came out, we said we accept the result. And then we
decided that we didn't accept the result.
So you want to stay in?
In the 27 manifesto, we said we would trigger Article 50, and we voted to trigger Article 50 in good faith at the beginning of the 2-year period, and said to the Prime Minister, go off and negotiate. At the very beginning, we said, these are the conditions when you come back. We're not going to accept anything you come back with. These are the conditions for accepting your deal. We've now got to the end of the exercise, and we are staring at the same deal with the same red lines, which we reject, or no deal. And it's in those circumstances that the Labour Party has said, against that backdrop, there ought to be a public vote.
Now, Sophie Ridge is nearly falling asleep at this stage.
Vote,
so do you want to stay in or not?
Well, at the moment, we've taken a decision to leave. We've got to
answer the question. Nurse Ratched. She must feel a bit like Charlie Cheswick there. Do you want to stay in now, or are you accepting that we have to leave?
To where we are. If there's a public vote, that would operate as a lock, if you like, on any deal that Theresa May gets through. If that is the position, then, in my view, the default ought to be Remain.
The default ought to be Remain. Let's ask the public to vote on May's deal, as in yes or no. And if they say no, the default should be to Remain. Lovely. I'm not going to say anything more about that. We're on the front page of the Telegraph, aren't we? Also on the front page of the Telegraph, in this era of identity politics and positive discrimination and endless chat about the need for diversity, is this story. Oxford rejects demand answers. It's a very tabloid type headline for the Sunday Telegraph, isn't it? Oxford rejects demand answers. Well, according to the Sunday Telegraph, middle-class Oxford University rejects are increasingly demanding explanations about why they missed out, because they think they are being squeezed out by the university's diversity drive. Every university is on a diversity drive now. They want to get equality in terms of numbers. They want the same amount of people from ethnic minority backgrounds as those from white backgrounds, middle-class backgrounds or whatever. So these diversity drives are meaning that people who might have gotten a place at Oxford in the past are losing out now, and they're kicking off. And in many cases, some of these people, they've got barristers and solicitors for parents. Their mums and dads are barristers and solicitors, and they're not having it. And they're looking at discrimination law and saying, what are you doing, right? So this is interesting. So according to the Sunday Telegraph, Oxford is under more pressure to admit more undergraduates from disadvantaged backgrounds. And colleges have started using contextual data about a student's background to inform tutors' decisions on their application. But students from white middle-class backgrounds who went to a private school or who grew up in a wealthy area do not fit into any of the diversity categories. So as they don't fit in, their applications are being turned down. So they want something that they're calling ultra feedback, right? They want to go right down to the forensic details as to why I was rejected, why I didn't get a place. And this is concerning the universities, because they're fearing now that there might be legal action taken against them for discrimination. I've said this 1,000 times. Discrimination is wrong. Discrimination against somebody because of their background is wrong. Of course it's wrong. If you don't want, if you decide not to admit somebody because they're Asian or because they're from a country in Africa, that's terribly wrong. Of course, you couldn't support that, right? But also you can't support that somebody is discriminated against because they're not black, or because they're not from Asia, or because they're not transgender. Because these crazy positive discrimination policies now include, well, you've got to have a certain amount of people who are trans. Why? Why do you have to? Why don't you just have the best candidates, you know, pound for pound, irrespective of where they come from? Whose exams were better? Whose entrance exams stood out? Well, give it to those people then. And don't worry a jot about where they come from or what they look like. It's a mad world. It really is, you know. And you know I'm not right-wing. You know I'm not some conservative commentator. I never have been, never will be. I just think this is crazy, and it could only end in a very, very bad way. Yeah. Oxford University said students can apply for feedback on any aspect of their application, including why they were not called for interview or why they were not offered a place following an interview. Right. I'm sure this one will raise its head again on the programme in the coming weeks and months. The Sunday Times front page, PM told quit to save Brexit. PM told quit to save Brexit. The Sunday Times alleges that senior Brexiteers have warned Theresa May that one way to get her deal passed, or in their opinion the only way, was if she said, right, I'll see this through the next couple of months, but I will leave in June. Right, we're ending Brexit. Here's the last of Brexit now. 21 minutes past the hour. Sunday Times saying that May has been told by senior MPs, the Brexiteers, listen, resign by June and we might have a chance. Sky Breakfast hosted a debate this morning between Chris Leslie MP of the independent group, the People's Front of Judea. No, they're not called the People's Front of Judea. They are the breakaway group, the independent group. They're called the independent group, right? And Chris Leslie is one of those. And he was on with James Gray. James Gray is a Tory MP and a hard Brexit supporter. We'll hear Chris Leslie first. Leslie says, wait for this, the arrogance of this is absolutely overwhelming. Leslie says, no deal won't happen because we will scupper it. Chris Leslie.
We will vote down the idea of leaving with no deal on Wednesday, as the Prime Minister promised to do. If we then need to legislate to extend Article 50 and give us time, certainly for us to resolve these ridiculous dilemmas that the Prime Minister's not had the strength to do, we must do that, and also have a chance to put this issue back to the public in a people's vote. That is also absolutely vital that we do that.
Chris Leslie, can I ask you then, do you understand why people like Steve Baker are saying that in the papers today, this is the death of democracy this week? Because we've had this huge democratic process, and which, you know, you're just not happy with, and you want to run it all again.
Simple as that, isn't it? In a nutshell, we didn't get the result we wanted, so we've worked for the last 2.5 years to destroy the possibility that the country would leave. We didn't get what we wanted, and that's about right. That was Stephen Dixon, the presenter. Spot on, really. Leslie?
Well, we had a referendum nearly 3 years ago, and just because a general election sometimes comes out with a decision doesn't mean people stop arguing their case. You have subsequent elections, and you can have a subsequent referendum. And I think if we, in the full knowledge now of where the Prime Minister is, how bad the deal is, it's a reasonable thing to say to the public, we need your valid consent to say, are you sure you want to leave on the terms that Parliament have come up with, or do you want to stay in the European Union?
Yeah, let's have a referendum every 2 years then. Are you sure now? Are you sure? Thanks for voting, and the results are in. We're staying in the European Union. Let's have an argument for a year, and then we'll ask you again, are you sure now? Are you sure? Are you sure? They didn't say exactly a once in a lifetime referendum, but they said it was a generational vote. In other words, you'll vote on it, we'll implement the result, and we won't look at it again for a generation. Liars. Here's Tory MP James Gray. He's not happy at all. He lays the blame for the current mess squarely at the feet of the European Union negotiators.
Well, the true villain in this piece, of course, and nothing to do, Chris Leslie didn't mention this, are the EU. We've been pressing for 3 years, best part of 3 years now, to get some kind of reasonable deal out of the EU, and they've absolutely refused. They haven't given 1 inch. Now, I was ready to support the Prime Minister's deal if she'd removed the backstop from it. And that's exactly the terms of the only thing we've had a majority for in the House of Commons in recent weeks. That was the Brady Amendment. And if she'd removed the backstop from it, if the EU had agreed to that, then I don't like the deal, but nonetheless I'd probably have supported it. But with the deal as printed, it's been the same for weeks and weeks and weeks now. There's no way in the world that people like me could possibly support it. The House of Commons won't support it. It will go down to a 200, who knows, 200 majority, something of that sort. And therefore, the Prime Minister has found herself in a very difficult position. I can see no other outcome reasonably, in a reasonable, foreseeable future, other than leaving with no deal. And I think that's far less catastrophic than people like Chris Leslie would suggest.
Yes, but the reality is, Mr. Gray, surely in all of this, that if the Prime Minister's deal doesn't go through, then what you're really looking at are MPs voting to avoid a no-deal Brexit on Wednesday, which, how you actually put that through is a difficult matter, but then ultimately extending Brexit on Thursday.
Well, you can't extend beyond the European elections, which are coming up on May the 11th, because, of course, we won't have British candidates for the European Parliament. So you can't have a long extension. And as for taking no deal off the table, as some of these people would like to do, frankly, Parliament voted by a very large majority in favour of the Act. It is now the law of the land that we will leave at 11 p.m. on the 29th of March. That is the law of the land. And the only way you can change that would be by changing primary legislation, and getting a new bill through Parliament by the 29th of March seems to me extremely difficult, not to say impossible.
Anyway, we're leaving it there. Tuesday, they'll vote on May's deal with the European Union. If it fails on Wednesday, they will have a vote on whether to take no deal off the table, meaning if they do, that means essentially that there must be a deal. It's over anyway. And then on Thursday, they'll vote then to extend Article 50, meaning that we won't leave on the 29th of March at 11 o'clock in the evening, which we're supposed to. We were never going to anyway. Some music then, while I take a breather and have a little sup of water. Some music. And when we come back, we'll talk about Jihadi brides returning from overseas. There's a story developing in Ireland as well, of course. You'll know by now that Shamima Begum's baby, her third child, died of pneumonia in a refugee camp, and Sajid Javid, the Home Secretary, has faced a lot of criticism about this over the last day or so. I've got some Johnny Cash lined up for you. And this is Ring of Fire on the Richie Allen Show. Howdy, partner. Back in two.
Love, the Ring of Fire, the Ring of Fire.
Johnny Cash and the Ring of Fire on the Richie Allen Show is a story about Johnny Cash that always makes me laugh. Many years ago, back in the early 1990s, he was having dinner with Bono of U2 and one or two other singers, celebrities, at his house, at his ranch, and he was telling them a story. Apparently Johnny Cash kept emus. If you're a Johnny Cash fan, you might have known that. He kept emus. I don't know why you'd do that, but he kept emus. And apparently, one morning he went into the pen, this big pen where there were plenty of emus, and his knees were fairly badly gone at this stage, so he was using a cane to help him walk. And as he got into the emu enclosure, he slipped, and apparently the emus went for him, came for him, tried to kill him, or that's the way he tells it anyway, and surrounded him and started pecking him and biting him and kicking him and everything. And he said to the assembled guests, who at this stage were falling on the floor laughing their backsides off, presumably a lot of drink was taken, he said, if it wasn't for the cane in my hand, I'd be a dead man. And then, can you imagine the legacy? Johnny Cash killed by his own emus. I just thought it was funny. We're going to talk now about this story, which is, as I said, it's Brexit-centric this morning, the UK newspapers, the media. Brexit-centric, but there is quite a bit of comment on the death of the the death of the baby of 19-year-old Shamima Begum, who is a British citizen, or was a British citizen until she was stripped of such by the Home Secretary Sajid Javid. The front page of the Observer newspaper today is this: Sajid Javid, a moral coward over death of Begum baby. He's been accused of moral cowardice and treating the UK as a banana republic. These are direct quotes. He's also been accused of pursuing leadership ambitions in the way he's handled the case of the ISIS bride Shamima Begum. A former director of public prosecutions and a Church of England bishop have basically led the outrage against Shamima Begum. You know that the Shadow Home Secretary Diane Abbott has weighed in very heavily on this as well, laying the blame for the death of the child squarely at the feet of the Home Secretary Sajid Javid. Right, two trains of thought here. We'll hear them. We'll hear from Rachel Shabby Late last night, she was on television talking about this. She's a journalist and author. And in a minute, we'll hear from Brendan O'Neill, who's the editor of Spiked Online. What does Rachel Shabby think of what's been happening to Shamima Begum and the death of the baby and the part played by Home Secretary Sajid Javid? Here's Rachel Shabby.
I think it's probably illegal to make someone stateless, but also, you know, whatever you might think of Shamima Begum, and I know that people have a whole range of feelings about her, that baby had done nothing wrong. So the lack of protection or lack of legal responsibility for that baby is quite shocking. And it is one of many children in this refugee camp where the wives and the children of Islamic State fighters are fleeing to. It's in northeastern Syria, Al-Hawal refugee camp, and conditions there are said to be absolutely horrific, including freezing. There's no heating there, which presumably is how this baby died. He would have been freezing and eventually, I think, died of pneumonia.
Yeah, that's how the child died. The editor of Spiked Online, Brendan O'Neill, says Shamima Begum and not Sajid Javid is ultimately to blame for the child's death. Brendan O'Neill.
If she had been able to come back, of course the baby would have had a better chance. But, you know, this story, it's absolutely horrendous, but it doesn't actually make me sympathise with Shamima Begum anymore. It actually makes me angrier with her, because she is the person, the only person responsible, actually, for the death of this child is Shamima Begum. It's not Sajid Javid. It's Shamima Begum who elected to travel thousands of miles to join an Islamic death cult. She went to this medieval, pre-modern hellhole to live and to support this group which was doing unspeakable things. It was her choice. Now, she was 15 years old when she made that choice. She was also an A-grade student, and she looked very hard into how she could join ISIS, so she wasn't some kind of innocent. The point is, she was then 16, 17, 18. She's now 19 years old. She still hasn't expressed remorse for having joined ISIS. She made this decision. She made this moral decision to join one of the worst terrorist groups in living memory. Sajid Javid didn't make her do that. I think it's absolutely outrageous, in fact, for Diane Abbott and other people to blame him or to say that he has blood on his hands, when the truth of the matter is, she's the person who made this choice. She went there. She had children in these terrible conditions under Islamic State rule, which was a barbaric state that enslaved women and beheaded people and so on. So it's her fault.
It's her fault, says Brendan O'Neill, ultimately. Now, to be fair to Brendan O'Neill, he went on to say that he didn't agree with the decision to render Begum stateless. So he's not as heartless as he might sound there to some people. I'm not saying that I find him heartless. I've got great respect for every opinion on this. I can understand people's opinions on this. So, look, there are people tweeting me this morning, and I have seen some of this in the last day or so. There are people saying that they don't believe that Shamima Begum was, in fact, pregnant or that she had a baby. So I'm acknowledging that. There are people saying that. I don't know. I have no idea. I'm taking it at face value that she was pregnant, right? There are some of you saying to me today, you don't believe it. Andy tweets, sad that a baby dies, but beds and lying on them comes to mind. You made your bed, so you lie on it. You see, whatever you and I think about immigration, I think that's you and me. I think we see eye to eye on quite a bit. I don't think you'd be listening if that wasn't the case. Although there's an argument to be made that that's not a good thing either, only listening to things that you agree with. But I think we see eye to eye. We understand that migration has been weaponized. You and I understand that these extreme Wahhabist jihadists, and they are in the minority, have been brought to life, funded and trained and armed by the intelligence agencies of this country. That happened because they wanted to destroy Syria. They wanted to destroy Afghanistan and Iraq using these lunatic, head-chopping, death cult members, right? We know this. We know that this was a deliberate policy. And we know that the effects of mass migration on countries not prepared for it is to ultimately destroy public services in those countries, but also to divide and conquer the existing population along lines of race, and ethnicity and religion. There's no doubt about that. You and I agree on all of that. There's no doubt about that at all. You know, I'm neither a conservative nor am I a liberal. So, look, the girl was born and bred in the United Kingdom. She was 15 when she went over there. Regardless of what her ethnic background is, she was 15 when she went over there. And I believe that agents of the intelligence community here in the UK made it easy or easier for people like her to be groomed and radicalised, and then, you know, enables them to get to Syria and to Iraq and to places like that. You can't just take somebody's statehood away from them, regardless of what they've done or what you think they have done or what you know they've done or what you suspect they've done. You can't allow that. That's illegal and should be illegal under international law. She should have been brought back to the country and should have had to undergo due process in this country here. That's my opinion. She was born and bred here. This is not a case of somebody who came into the country as a refugee and then pissed off to Syria to join a death cult. In which case you could say to me, well, don't let him back. Fair enough. Fair enough, you won't get an argument from me. A lot of people, again, expressing doubts about this. David tweets, okay, so you're not meant to fly when heavily pregnant, so how did Begum get about? Asks David. Again, you know, I'm acknowledging a number of people saying that you don't believe this. Martin tweets, she's only being used by the state as a puppet. She's a young woman, and I have no doubt that when she arrived over there, she was subjected to sexual abuse. I have no doubt in my mind that's the case. So you have a responsibility as her government. The Foreign Office had a responsibility and the Home Office had a responsibility to say, right, we'll get you back. When you come back, you've got a lot of questions to answer. But again, the irony here is, and it can't be ignored. Now, the far right will ignore this because it suits them. There is no truth in the far right. There is no integrity. There is no real journalism. They just take what they want to suit their argument. The fact is, those now in government like Sajid Javid complaining about people like Shamima Begum and saying they should have their citizenship taken away from them. You know, it's the same government that gave oxygen and life to ISIS and to they've got so many names now for these, you know, jihadi terror groups operating in Africa and in the Middle East. It's our governments that have enabled them to act in the first place, right? So it's a difficult one, this. For people, there is a story developing in Ireland, and it concerns the former Irish Taoiseach, a man called Bertie Ahern, one of the biggest morons that ever lived, Bertie Ahern. A woman called Lisa Smith from Dundalk. This is a white Irish woman. Was previously a member of the Irish Defence Force and previously worked on the official plane of the Irish Taoiseach. She's been picked up by American forces in Syria, or US-backed forces, under suspicion of joining ISIS. She is reported to have been detained along with her 2-year-old son by forces in northern Syria in the last few days, and is suspected to have been over there working with ISIS, this woman who was trained by the Irish Army, the Irish Defence Forces, right? So obviously there's a massive outcry now in Ireland not to allow her back into the country. But tough shit, Paddy. She's Irish, and you're going to have to deal with it. And she's going to have to come back with her son. I know there are people, including a previous guest on this programme, expressing outrage about it, and I respect their opinion, but tough shit, Paddy. She's got to come back, right? And if she has committed any crimes while in the Middle East, while in Syria, she should be charged with them, tried in a court of law in Ireland, and if found guilty, sentenced accordingly. That's what I would say. It's fairly straightforward, this, you know. But the media's turned this into a big, massive soap opera. And you have people on the right screaming and shouting about it, screaming and roaring about it. And then you have people on the left screaming and roaring about it. And the truth is overlooked, right? ISIS exists because Western intelligence agencies created them to sack Syria. That's a fact. So all of this then becomes moot later on. Shamima Begum, Lisa Smith. No, you can't just take their citizenship away from them. Bring them home and interview them. Maybe the intelligence agencies of the United Kingdom don't want Shamima Begum to come back home and don't want her to be testifying in a court of law, because maybe Shamima Begum might have some very uncomfortable things to say. You know? She might have things to say. There are things she might have seen, people she might have come to know. And I think that's got a lot to do with it as well. 18 minutes to the top of the hour. This is Sunday View. The Mail on Sunday, front page, nurse is suspended over care of Stephen Hawking. It's an interesting one, this. Stephen Hawking, of course, the great astrophysicist, the great scientist who died a couple of years ago. Apparently a nurse who worked for him for 15 years has been suspended in a secret tribunal over allegations of serious misconduct concerning his care. Now, she stopped caring for Stephen Hawking 2 years before he died, but the allegations made against her, things that she's alleged to have done when caring for him, are so severe, apparently, they will never be made public. I don't understand this. Do you, dear listener? Where's the transparency? Stephen Hawking, rest in peace, is dead. Why are these allegations not being made public? This is going to be held in secret, this. Whatever happens is not going to be disclosed. We're being told by the Mail on Sunday today. It's going to be a substantive hearing. It will decide what happens to her, held behind closed doors, and it is likely that we will never hear the charges that have been made against this woman. What happened to an open and transparent society? What happened to that? Very strange story, this. Again, this woman stopped caring for him before he died. Her name is Patricia Dowdy. She's 61 now. Details of the case have been suppressed by the body which regulates nursing. Why is that? Can you give me any answers on that? The Sunday Mirror, knife crime. Right, it's been all over the press. A 19-year-old man was stabbed in London last night by a 17-year-old man, or a 17-year-old boy. The victim is apparently fighting for his life. There doesn't seem to be an end to this. And the Sunday Mirror front page, they run with exposed sick trade in superhero knives. Because the Sunday Mirror is saying that knives with superhero branding, massive knives, are on sale online. It's very easy to buy them, apparently, and they are being targeted at teenagers, marketed at teenagers, with one website posting a new offer just after Jodie Chesney died last week. Rather insensitive. Maybe the offer had been scheduled to go live on the website. Maybe they didn't know anything about Jodie Chesney dying. But anyway, posting offers. These knives are deadly. The Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, has been speaking this morning and explaining why he believes, incredibly, the NHS can play a part in tackling knife crime. Here's Matt Hancock speaking with Sophie Ridge.
The truth is, with knife crime, you can only tackle it if lots of different people come together. It isn't just an issue for the police, although obviously they're very important. And so I want the NHS to play its full part in making sure that we rise to this challenge that everybody feels is so important to tackle. And not least because when these young people, when these children arrive in hospital, that is a moment when you can intervene and try to tackle the problem. And, you know, they were just little kids just a few years ago. And the idea that this can only be tackled with the strong arm of the law is wrong. When they arrive in hospital, that's a moment that you can really make a strong intervention and get people involved to try to turn people's lives around.
At the same time, though, NHS staff are already under immense time pressure. We know about the challenges in the NHS. It's well documented. I mean, is this really just trying to put a sticking plaster, if you like, over the fact that so many police have been cut, around 20,000 since 2010, and trying to get NHS workers to plug that gap?
Brilliant question by Sophie Ridge. It's insane. Police numbers are down by over 20,000. There are no police officers on our streets. Think about this for a moment. I'm in the Fallowfield area of Manchester, and I'm not far from Princess Road, which if you go north on Princess Road, very quickly you reach Moss Side. Moss Side is an estate. It's very well known because it's had one or two problems with antisocial behaviour and crime and drugs over the years. Moss Side, right? So you've got Moss Side, you've got Fallowfield. Massive area. I learned, and I can say this without fear of contradiction, because I was told by a policeman himself, this entire area, on any given night, only has one patrol car patrolling it. It's a massive area of square kilometres, right? Square miles. You've got one patrol car. I can't remember the last time I saw a police officer walking around as part of his or her job, you know, keeping an eye on things and being visible out there. Bobbies, they used to call them. Doesn't happen. Once in a blue moon I'll see a police horse, because not far from where we live are stables where police horses are boarded, and they're just taking them out to exercise them. They're not patrolling really. So there are no police. This is the problem. And the laughable notion that you can say to the NHS, which is being destroyed deliberately in order to bring in privatisation, the laughable notion by the Health Secretary Hancock that you can say, right, we'll get the NHS now. When these people are coming in having been stabbed or having been in a fight, we'll intervene and get some sort of counselling going on, or try to get them some way to walk away from their life of violence. This is just monumental bollocks. And Sophie Ridge's question was brilliant. Dwindling police numbers, the NHS is creaking. I know you want to put this on the NHS. What does he say?
Back out.
No, it's about working across the different silos of government, if you like. This approach has been tried in Baltimore, which has in the past been one of the most violent cities in the world. And it's worked very effectively to reduce by around 85% the number of people who come back with another knife injury. And it's about getting the right intervention to these children, to these young people at the right moment.
Now, at this stage, she should be interrupting him and asking him for some detail, not just political bullshit speak, right? At this stage, she should be saying, well, what do you mean exactly? Intervene how? Are you talking about putting people into hospitals, employing people, trained, you know, specially trained to speak to these children, to take them away? What are you talking about exactly? But she doesn't ask him.
Moment. And often the moment that you arrive in hospital is obviously a critical moment for anybody. And that's when people are open to changing their behaviour and to responding differently. And if you just treat the physical person, then you're only treating part of the problem, because what we don't want to do is just patch people up and send them back out into exactly the same environment that led them in the first place. What we want to do is at that moment intervene to give them the full support to turn around, to get out of the gangs and to make the changes needed to get away from knife crime.
Yeah, it's just nonsense is what it is. There's a number of stories today in the press about knife crime and the reasons for it. Some of them are alleging that in many cases the kids involved come from a one-parent home. There's no, in many cases there's no dad there. It's a single mother, so there's no male influence. I don't know about that. I really don't. I'm not an expert in this area, or any area maybe you might say. Also, Peter Hitchens is writing in the Mail on Sunday. Now, I didn't read the article, but he's talking about cannabis. I know this will get the backs up of many of our listeners because they will say cannabis is harmless. I think Hitchens might be talking about skunk. Skunk is not harmless. I told you this on the show 6 or 7 months ago. I came across a very aggressive guy whacked out of his brains on skunk on the Fallowfield Loop about 6 months ago, and the guy was violently deranged. Skunk is a problem. Whether that's the answer, it seems a bit too simplistic to me. I'll leave it up to you. I want to leave with this. A listener got in touch with me over the weekend, and the listener, whom is, I'm not going to say whether he is male or she is female, I'll give no clues to the identity. The listener, lovely person, got in touch with me, and they work at the University College Cork. It's a big and very well known, prominent university in Ireland. And the listener got in touch with me and asked me to have a look at something. All of the staff at the University College Cork a couple of weeks ago were emailed by the President to say that the LGBT staff committee was having a bit of a do, at which badges would be handed out for those attending, badges that show that you are an LGBT ally. Okay? Voluntary. Come to this LGBT do. It's recommended that you do. And when you do, we'll give you a badge. And you'll wear the badge saying that you are an ally of LGBT people. Now, my listener was asking the question that, my listener was basically saying that they were speaking with other staff members and they were wondering that if they didn't wear the badge, would it be considered or would it be said that you are not an ally of LGBT people? Is it appropriate at work anyway, where your sexuality is and should be completely irrelevant, says my listener. And then my listener forwarded the emails to me, which was very interesting because I do find it a bit creepy, you know. It's a kind of a creeping kind of authoritarianism, you know, a creeping way of trying to nail people down to publicly stating that they have the correct and right opinions on any issues. So anyway, this is coming from the president of the University College Cork, saying, you know, the library will be launching the new University College Cork Rainbow Alliance. So the Rainbow Alliance will be a new creation. All UCC staff are invited to this event. They talk about Donald Og Cusack, who is an Irish hurling legend and somebody who came out, and that he will be there. So the emails go on. All staff members are invited to join the Rainbow Alliance. In doing so, a staff member signifies that they are an LGBT plus ally. It's entirely voluntary, of course, but sends a powerful signal to all members of our university community that this is a welcoming place that values diversity and inclusion. Committee members of the Staff LGBT Plus network will be distributing materials at the launch, including button pins. Colleagues are invited to take away and later display and wear as a tangible and visible sign of support for their LGBT colleagues and students. This is very sinister stuff, isn't it? We'll be giving you a badge that says, I'm an ally of the LGBT plus community. We encourage you to wear it. A number of staff have already signed up as allies, and it includes a broad spectrum of the university community. And it goes on to say, I hope that over the next year and beyond, more colleagues will be encouraged to join in, showing visible support for LGBT plus members of the UCC community. If any colleague is wondering if a scheme like this is necessary, I would urge them to read the findings in the LGBTI Ireland report and the LGBT Britain University report of 2018. Hope to see you at the launch, and if you can't attend it but would like to become an ally, please do get in touch with the LGBT Plus Staff Network after the launch and they will send you out a pack. Best wishes, Professor Patrick G. O'Shea, President of UCC. Listen, dear listener, you know where I am on this. I want to thank the listener who sent me this because it is very important, it's very sinister. People who have no problem with or never had a problem with gay, straight, lesbian, bisexual or trans people are now being asked to consider wearing a pin or a badge to show solidarity. And it's being heavily implied in the language, in the wording of the emails, that it's really the right thing to do. You're asking people who have never had a problem, never gave an arse about somebody and their sexual orientation. This is a dreadful thing. This is a creeping fascism, a creeping totalitarianism. We want to find out what you think about this and what you think about that. The reason we want to find out is because we want to match it or check it against the accepted way of thinking. And if it doesn't, well, either some re-education for you, or maybe you should consider maybe this is not the right place for you to work. That's how dangerous this is getting. You know, there might be people working at the University College of Cork who frown on gay relationships, but so what? as long as they keep it to themselves, and as long as they treat the LGBT people the same as they treat everybody else, which they probably do anyway. And as I said, the vast majority of people just don't care. Wear a pin to show that you're an ally. Thanks again to the listener for sending that. It's madness, this. It's madness, and there's no opposition to it. Nobody is saying, but look, can you not see where this is going to lead eventually in terms of free speech and freedom of thought? Thanks again. Very important that. University College Cork. Well, I'll leave it there. That's it for Sunday View. Thanks so much for listening. I've been Richie Allen. You and I will speak again tomorrow with all the luck in the world at 5 p.m. UK time for Monday's Richie Allen Show. I'll have 2 guests and plenty to talk about as usual. Thanks for tweeting the programme during the last hour. If I didn't read your tweet out, I'm sorry, quite a few came in. Leaving you with the Kings of Leon and a song called Back Down South now, which I love a lot. So enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Do something positive with it. Kiss the person you love. Have a good day. Speak tomorrow.